Chapter 7. I saw another one last night on the way home, said Zero. Right on the sidewalk near the underpass. You never know how people wind up like they do. 1,000 shocks, somebody once said. You're pretty much in for 1,000 shocks that could come at any time, no matter how careful you are. I always imagine a movie poster with a guy lit up by 1,000 electrodes. But the shocks don't happen all at once. They come to you one at a time, or maybe in threes. You get a letter. Your mom's dead. She finally succeeded. You find out there's insurance money involved. No one to collect it because your sister's MIA. You start spending it in your head and you see yourself living on the Big Rock Candy Mountain. The river runs brown with dope and fresh syringes hang like fruit bats from the trees in Tompkins Square. Another letter arrives, this time with urgent stamped across it. Mom went on a whirlwind manic jag at the end and burned through everything. She lifted off this planet owing a ton. If you were legit, they'd attach you is what they'd do. Attach your wages until doomsday. You're still on shock number 1, but who's counting? Maybe some guy you burned back in prehistoric last year sees you floating along Avenue C talking to yourself, counting your mom's imaginary money, lost on the Big Rock Candy Mountain. A .22 hollow point skids off the sidewalk in front of you and you catch a hot little fragment in your cheek. This is going to give you much gravitas out here, you tell yourself in emergency at St. Vincent's. This is going to give you entree into unseen worlds. It also counts as shock number 2. There can be an upside sometimes to a shock. Entrees and much gravitas. Or maybe you're just a peckerwood now with a hole in his face. Some people, they see a glass half full and call it empty. Shock number 3 is your blood test, the mandatory one from Dr. K's Methadone Emporium. You have hepatitis something, 1 or 2 of the letters in the alphabet. They told you that when they were stitching up your drooling face, but you were not in your body at the time. You were swinging off the blonde pigtails of a 16-year-old girl into a skull-shaped swimming pool filled with pharmaceutical cocaine. The hills were full of dead movie stars, and all the shark fin cars were living, breathing works of art. All they had to do was sit there. Whatever they gave you on that gurney was worth getting dinged for. But the one I saw walking home tonight makes 8 so far this year. That's exactly how you know how good the dope is out here now. Especially this thing called To the Moon, Alice, which they did a little piece about on Live at 5. Sue Simmons, whose life I'd like to ruin, whose tits belong on Big Rock Candy Mountain. She's out in front of an ambulance doing a stand-up on To the Moon, Alice, and she's speaking in that professionally concerned voice they taught her at fuckable news lady school. Red splashes of oscillating ambulance light across her face make her look like she's being murdered with an axe. This is like an infomercial for To the Moon, Alice. And suddenly there's a run on it out here. You can't find a bag to save your life. To save your life. This woman from Yorkville, the one we call Yorkie. She's sitting by the open window, blowing Virginia Slims all up into the blank afternoon. A human cattle drive rushes along above her head. Yorkie's got nowhere to ever be but the non-place of right here. Her face is pulled back tight like she's leaning into a wind tunnel, and her mouth's always slit a little bit open. Through the smoke, it looks like the mouth of a carp in a cloudy fish tank in a Chinese restaurant in 1947. I fell in with this crack dealer uptown named Softy, said Yorkie. Softy because he really did used to drive one of those ice cream trucks around. Remember that sad little lullaby? He used to let me sit up in the cab and watch the crackheads swarm in and out of there like every day was Christmas at Macy's. It was a continuous river of people that all looked the same. They all looked like the same 10 people on a conveyor belt, on their way with no luggage, to and from heaven and hell. He liked to show me off, I think. Once in a while he'd throw one of the crackheads a beating, and maybe he'd make one of them go down on their knees, make them give him head in front of me. He got a charge out of that. Well, so did I. It was hard. It was hard to get a charge out of anything. And we'd go through a lot of stims, yes we would. When you got all that rock in the world and a freezer at your feet and you feed that pipe nonstop, I don't know if you know this, but you can just fry a glass dick right there to your fingers. Weld it to your mouth. You know that sizzling sound? Like ice breaking under your feet, and then the glass goes all over you. And that smell, it never leaves your nostrils. That smell like, I don't know, that sick, sweet monoxide, roast cadaver smell like burnt caramel and cotton balls soaked in pus. You never get it off you. He was good to me, though, Mr. Softy. He was kind and good to me. It was like a thing with him. Around me, he was just like that big smiling picture of Mr. Softy on the side of his truck. You know, the one with his hair made out of vanilla swirls. And then some kid from the lanes walked up under him one morning and shot him in the throat. I wasn't there, but they said it was really messy. When I'm choking her, I want to kill off everything in her that's not me, said Zero. To see what's left over. See if I can know it, name it. Forget about loving it. The stars appear in her eyes like closing credits when I bring her to the edge. It's not about me at all, and I need it to be that way. I could never show up for anyone. That would be predictable. I once saw Mom cut a switch from a rosebush and go after Sis with it. She could never catch either one of us, and that was just understood. It was there in the instructions of the games we played. I hear the whistling sound of the switch and the overripe roses go flying everywhere. It was the earliest version of what I took for beautiful. It got into me like thorns. You get most of what you'll ever get from this life in the first 10 years. One time a truck stopped outside with the word exterminators stenciled on it. It was a tanker truck filled with poison. Men got out with wands attached to hoses, and they went all around spraying in all the cracks and corners. And one of them concentrated on the roses, but it was too late. They hung on the lattices my grandfather made. Stuff with legs ran out from under things. I saw a blur shaped like a rat, and then two, and then dozens and dozens. Blank is 10, and she's wiping the cum off her thighs for the first time. It's August, way before her high school yearbook. Her dad's just whipped her into a trance with a length of garden hose he made special for her. The sky's like mercurochrome, everything glowing from within. Blank studies the hard-on through her dad's Levi's. She feels destroyed and all-powerful at the same time. In this week's episode, the role of her dad is played by yours truly. The boredom of this suffocates both of us like cats in a pillowcase. Most everything memorable happens before you're 10. Did you know rats are smarter than 14-year-old children? They can leave a trail with their own urine and find their way across continents, across oceans. When I'm zipper mouth, I feel empty. And empty is good, said Bam Bam. It all goes into whoever's on their knees. Grace likes to beg for her life. She's done things she can't forgive herself for, and I'm there to help her settle up. It's all about that place where fear meets desire. She's handcuffed in bra and panties. Little bluebirds flying off for the winter in them. Don't kill me, says Grace. People change. I can change. People are what they are, says Zippermouth. Get your ass in the air. The rope I use on her is like the one Proust talked about that fell out of heaven one day. I'm maybe 10, but my G.I. Joes are all lined up at a court-martial. The one with the sandpapery crew cut is about to hang. I've learned crochet so I can make the noose to scale and give it texture in my hand. What you do is you make an S. You make an S with a length of crochet and you fold that S in on itself and you wrap 13 rings around and you pull the end through the loop. Crew cut is stripped naked, smooth and surrounded in a half moon by his boys. They can't help him now. I pull his arms out of their sockets and bind his wrists behind him. If the house burned down, you'd die from breathing his melting fumes. One time my sister put crew cut up inside her. I could hear her howling like a coyote in the next room. Grace turns on a faucet of tears. 90% of our time together is about this waterfall. I'm going to cut your throat, says Zippermouth. Get up. Get up on your knees. All the other G.I. Joes are dressed in stolen Kindle clothes, Hawaiian shirts and little frayed cut-offs. They look like grown men stuffed into kids' clothes because Kin is made by Mattel and they do things differently over there. Sis had to pop Crew Cut's head off like a champagne bottle before she did that. Now he's going to hang for the good of all. Grace is some kind of lawyer in a big glass tower in Midtown. The one that winks red and blue all night. You can see it from Jersey as you round that loop. I specialize in slapping her silly. I love you, said Zippermouth. I'll put you in the ground with all the others. Who's going to care? And there's fresh hieroglyphs blooming up her thighs and back. She comes all over the place like she's in some kind of Olympics. $250 in 36 minutes. My sister got fooled around with by the neighbor. He told her he was from the government and could read her mind. He knew every bad thing she ever did before she knew. Come over here, he said. I know how to save you. I'm Spider-Man. Why do we do what we do to ourselves and each other? Never ask why. Tune in next week when B-Girl sees a trick she went to high school with. He always wanted a piece of her, so he cuts off a piece of her and leaves a little extra money on the bed. This is something that will happen in a sea of other things that will happen. Some of these things will happen to you. Maybe you'll win the lottery you never bought a ticket for. A woman who looks like Malibu Barbie will show up at your door with the news. Who are you to fuck around with fate? Somebody got the names mixed up. A 6 fell down drunk and became a 9. A 0 is mistaken for an O. For an O? Everything's a Chinese horse story. A Chinese farmer buys his kid a horse. Kid's thrown off horse and breaks his leg. Doesn't get called up for the war because he's in traction or whatever. All his friends get slaughtered like spring lambs. Kid stays home, falls in love with his nurse. She turns out to be a carrier of the plague. Kid catches the plague and infects the whole town. If only he'd gone to war. If it hadn't been for that flea-bitten horse. Or that flea-bitten farmer. If and only are the most important words. The simplest words. The only 2 words you need to know. How many junkies does it take to change a light bulb? Only 1, but don't count on it. If only it hadn't been for that horse. If only Malibu Barbie were here. She comes with a string in her back you can pull that will make her say whatever you want. I know you're not gonna believe this, but it was called Needmore Road, said Tanya. We used to run down to Needmore Road 5 times a day for them pills. It was all about dillies and oxys and them little purple Xannies. $1 a milligram even way back then. $10 a milligram for the 4 milligram Dilaudid. You do what you have to do to get the money up. I got so I could slam me 4 or 5 of them dillies, the 4 milligram Dilaudid. They draw up like yellow piss from your cooker. And just mouthfuls of oxys and xannies. They go together like peaches and cream. They make each other stronger. You try to find something nice to wear. I used to wear a black slip I took off this queen in a home invasion. I slid it way up high on my thigh like Marilyn Manson in Beautiful People. I stick my thumb out on North Dixie and trick my way down to Needmore and back. Everybody needs more. Everybody. You get a thing going with a couple of shell stations off the interstate. You give the morning guy and the overnight guy a real hard Hollywood blowjob till their eyes roll back. They let you in them toilets anytime, all the time. You could just about live there. I used to hide makeup all up under those hot air blasters. Used to melt my mascara all over the insides of them shits till the place stunk like a paint factory. So you want to get all in good with the shell stations coming and going. You can fix your face, put on those raccoon eyes in the mirror on the way to Needmore Road, and then swing in there again on your way back to slam home them pills. And if you're anything like me, you've got some delicate little Cinderella veins that burn out real quick, and you could be in there making fake puke noises till Jesus comes off the cross. So you save your best head, your top-shelf professional fellatio for those shell station attendants. You get that part down and the rest of the world falls at your feet. I need 2 names, said 2 names, because there are 2 of me. The dope me and the dope sick me. And this is what you get when you take away the dope and the sickness. I'm 2 names stand-in. I'm his stunt double. The food arrives. It looks just like the Technicolor pictures of itself. Scorched Denny's coffee all around, and the subject turns to what we ate when we were out there. Lucky Charms, Fruit Loops, Count Chocula, stale Danish and rotting pears from the Dean and DeLuca dumpster, Hostess Twinkies, bright biohazard orange Kraft cheese slices, each in their own little shrink-wrapped shroud. Did you like those too? And Wonder Bread. Lots and lots of Wonder Bread, says Chemo Cheryl. We liked it plain. The rats liked it plain. And I still like it plain. What you do is you tear off the crusts and roll the soft middle part up between your palms and eat it just like a big white snowball. Somebody remembers a 10-gallon vat of Hellman's mayonnaise and the way we set it right there in the middle of the room, you know, and how everything tasted dipped in mayonnaise, and all the jokes around the circle, all around the circle about Hellmans and how we were probably in hell, man, and this was the mayo they serve you when you get downstairs to hell, man. And everything tasted good for a while. You wouldn't believe, dipped in mayo, everything ding-dongs and Twinkies and cold Oscar Mayer bodega barbecue pork rinds and Mrs. Paul's icicle fish sticks and freezer-burned onion rings, Twizzlers and beef jerky, Pepperidge Farms, Slim Jims and Funyuns, and everything tasted like mayo until we lost that big red lid playing Frisbee. Cray-Cray almost put an eye out, and it was like throwing a buzzsaw around, and then After a few days, the room gave off a smell like the inside of an old woman's thighs, and everything tasted like sour milk. But we kept on dipping. We kept on dipping until the vat was clean, and we flipped it over and used it for a conga drum, and then a footstool and a little white coffee table to cook dope on. We keep going back to that day at the Strand, said Zero. We went gliding along through 8 miles of books. Somebody had piled up a huge display of every kind of known book on urban warfare, and down the aisle another one on urban gardening. 100-something books on gardening in the city. On rooftops, in alleys and vacant lots. Even one called Windowsills. Don't be shy, beautify. We floated along and found ourselves in the animals section. We stood under some tall shelves labeled mammals. We're mammals, said Blank. Maybe there's a book in here on us. We sank down and pulled a huge volume off the bottom called Rodentology. It was full of life-size pictures with those see-through anatomy panes showing the insides of all kinds of rodents. We flipped to the rats and settled in. 64 known species, it said right there. In ancient Rome, there was no word for a rat. They were simply called Mus maximus, or big mouse. Rats thrive in cities. 18%, it went on to say. 18% of all homes are infested. A Blank went skating off for a minute, and she came back with a giant encyclopedia in both arms called Mammalian Nurturing. It had a long subtitle which she was not about to get into. We loved to read out loud to each other, now that our personal backstories were all used up. Dope made us into chatty Cathys, and any kind of reading would do, especially TV guide blurbs and the labels on junk food. We couldn't believe what they put in Cheetos, the fried kind of biohazard orange Cheetos we covet above all things. Hey, look, I said. Here's a Gambian pouch rat. The biggest rat on Earth. And it's not even really a rat. Well, that's typical, said Blank. 3.5 feet long, I said, including the tail. Once in a while, they smuggle some in as pets, and when they get too big, they turn them loose down there in them tunnels. Blank thumped open to the middle of her book and started in on a piece about rabbits. Apparently, they did an experiment involving nurtured rabbits and some other rabbits who were denied closeness with their rabbit mothers. The nurtured rabbits all grew up happy and well-adjusted. They turned out just like the kind you'd want to have around on Easter. They had glowing coats and sparkling, thoughtful eyes. The other rabbits, the orphan, neglected ones, they developed a condition called failure to thrive. They hid in the corners of their cages and they chewed bald patches in their coats, and once in a while one of these unloved rabbits would tear into another one and rip it apart. And they tended to hold their bunny ears back in a posture of alarm, even when there was no threat around anywhere in Rabbit Land. It was a good story. I fell off into a deep nod listening to Blank read. I went sailing down that dope river, and there was Easter bunnies waving from one shore, and big, mean, neglected rabbits with rat tails on the other shore. The mean rabbits were cooking something in a big pot. It looked human, and it was thrashing around in there. I reached down to find the paddle for my canoe, but it was all chewed through by rodents. Probably the big, mean, unloved rabbits did it. I felt myself pulled into the mean rabbit shore. They were waiting for me, howling like wolves. I smelled burning rubber. My lit cig was melting a hole through my Converse. I was under that lotus tree. "Hey, babe, why didn't you?" I trailed off. "You look so blissful," said Blank. "So very, very blissful." She let go of her book and her body and her voice and joined me on Rabbit Island. We were among the giant benevolent Easter bunnies now, and they took us into their warm mothering fur, and soon we were roasting them on spits and eating them and wearing them around us like mink stoles. Like rabbit mink stoles. Everybody loves to hear Pruno kick it. Mr. Jail's institutions and death. He's been shot more times than Debonair. They should have a bullet hole runoff. Pruno's in some big medical book for having been stabbed through the beating heart and walking himself to St. Vincent's and then strolling away right after surgery. There were drugs to attend to, you see. And you can't depend on those people to... Somebody needs to make a movie out of the book Pruno won't get around to writing because he's too busy living out the last chapter of it. When you kill someone out there, word gets around, said Pruno. Then there's an aura that surrounds you in the streets. Your name rings out. You become known. But those who are close to the one you killed now want you dead. So there's also a scent that follows you. A scent that could be used to track you. The scent of the blood you spilled out on the ground. The scent of your own death, maybe. The streets have that sheen when they've just been hosed down and you float along above your own body on the way to the ER and you say to yourself, "It's me. It's me who's making the streets shine tonight." "I grew up in a cook house," said Shawty. She's filling in tonight as guest speaker for this Wednesday Addams-looking girl who didn't show up again. Wednesday's kind of MIA at this point. She hasn't been around the rooms in weeks. We always think the worst whenever one of us drops away. "I grew up in a cook house, and that was my entire world. I never got up out of there until I lost my second baby. 14. I was 14 when they came one day and ran looked like a big potato masher through the kitchen door. Cops all up in the house dressed like Darth Vaders. They tore out the walls, the floors. They went up in the ceiling and made icicles shower down on our heads. The meth had that axle grease thing, you know. The smell, the taste from what they packed it in. I've had garlic meth, coffee meth, Tabasco sauce meth. You can make a full course meal. And cash money, too. $100 bills like leaves falling. I never knew it was a cookhouse until I thought everybody all over the world in every house lived like that. I started smoking dust when I was 9. I was the little Susie homemaker around there, and I stole hits off joints people left all around in the burning ashtrays. Everybody dusted their weed, and there was half cans of Budweiser piled up like castles. I remember those red and white labels. It looked like royalty. I lived on warm beer and pink snowballs and Twinkies. The man my mother ran with put a stem in my mouth when I was 12, and he said, "Here, little girl, I'll show you where God lives." And the little blonde hairs all over my body stood up straight at attention and tingled. I felt God put his tongue down my throat. Other things, too. Went steady with everybody in that house. Triple X videos played and played. Moaning and cursing came out of all the TVs like people were on fire. I did things. Did everything they showed me. I cowgirled around in little pony rides on the fronts of naked people. I got knocked up for the first time. Lost it down the toilet. It looked like, I don't know, a rat. Maybe the daddy was a rat. They ran all over us at night. They chewed on the little tenders underneath my toes. I learned how to do hot rails off the Formica counter. You crush it up real fine. You torch that pipe till it closed like a reindeer's nose. And then you huff the lines and they vaporize in the stem. It hits you 100 times faster than snorting. I learned how to help with the cook. Mix this up with that and not too much of this, and then wait, and then more of that, and then shake and bake. Burned out the little tunnels on the insides of my nostrils. I lost my smell. One time I stayed up for a week, I think. From one Sunday night Sopranos to the next Sunday night Sopranos. They were killing each other off like hogs that season. You gotta shed that skin, you know. The skin off that snake. I was zipped up. I was, said Pipsqueak. I heard the air go zip all around me. I was a suit of dry cleaning. Inside the bag, my blood stood still in my veins. I heard a lapping and then a calm sea in my ears. Blood gathered at the bottom of me and weighed me down like stones. I don't know how they did it, how they lifted me. They talk about a light, said Daisy. A tunnel and some light and a voice calling you. It's not like that. It's not like anything. Did you ever fall asleep in the back seat and then wake up and you're home? They stuffed me in a green hefty bag, goes Cray Cray. The duct tape went screech like a pterodactyl. Screech. Back in the day, we used to play a game called Guess My Weight, where you try to measure out in a spoonful how much dope each other's bodies can take. If these bodies are healthy and the dope is like yesterday and not like last week. It is a very simple game. Any two or more can play. If you win, you go to a place higher than the snow peaks of heaven. If you lose, you just go straight to heaven. You never hear the pterodactyl. My ex, he threw me in a bathtub, said Limbo. A bathtub full of ice cubes. He went to grab the ice out the freezer and his big meaty hand stuck to the trays. Pulled all the skin off his fingers like hot wings. I was a child again, said Baby Mama. Everything looked new. The sun had a face and smiled down like Sesame Street. It warmed me, put its butterscotch arms all around me. I heard laughing and squealing and playgrounds full of singing. I was made out of love. None of the things that were going to happen to me had happened to me yet. And then they brought me back. She spins around and around in the dusk, but it's not really, said Zero, because the streetlights don't allow it. Birds from an old cartoon light on her shoulders and her wrists. The same wrists she slit open long ways in a bathtub in Long Island. The scars look like unfinished pentagrams. I have never once mentioned them until right this minute. I've made enchantment, she says, doing what's-her-name in that streetcar movie. Leaves unhook from the canopy over our heads and blow all around us in funnels. This speed has a long tail on it. A half-life that hangs over for days and weeks and makes you do and say things you were never built for. That's the selling point, maybe. To make enchantment out of the filth of ourselves for a day or two. Look at the moon up there. It's got our names crossed out on it. The horses outside the plaza know every hair on the backs of our arms. I was Sleeping Beauty once at the last minute in the high school play, Blank says. The girl who was cast as Beauty got mashed in between two cars on the way to the show. It twisted her around like The Exorcist. I stood outside the high school smoking cools with my girlfriends, who were closer to me than sisters and looked like my stand-ins. All of us with flowing manes of blonde hair you could climb down. "Who wants to play Sleeping Beauty?" said a voice from inside. "All you have to do is lie there. Lie there." Blank is writing something backwards in the air with her finger. The speed's got a hold of me now, and I see the words hanging there like a mobile, turning around with Blank in the false twilight. What they don't tell you is everything. What they don't tell you is how fast you can use yourself up. How fast you can use each other up. All you have to do is lie there. "We called it the Summer of Sirens," said Jane Doe. She's always with her look-alike boyfriend, John. Jane and John Doe. They sit in the back like newlyweds and finish each other's shares. Between the two of them, they've been dead about 9 times. "It started with the Sirens, remember, honey?" goes Jane. "Sometimes in summer we'd sleep out there, on the fire escape where there was never any fire to escape from. And even if there was, we were only 1 flight up and we could slide down that little ladder from our window. But all through that summer we'd sleep out there, and it was just like levitating. Like our souls leaving our own 2 bodies above the street. And so the sirens, right?" said John. "It got so we couldn't sleep for all the sirens screaming around. All through the side streets and up and down the avenues all night. At least 1 or 2 every hour, and we'd be up there, all blissful," said Jane. "Floating above our own 2 bodies, all spooned together, rolling in Jesus' arms, and and here comes another meat wagon right underneath us. It got so we could never even get more than a couple hours sleep, and it was all about that good raw shit that flooded the neighborhood that summer. When they opened up downstairs, it was like walking the dog. Remember that, babe? We didn't even have to get out of our bathrobes anymore. We were just like yell down from our window, and one of us or the other would slip down there half naked and cop. It was almost perfect," said John. "Until the sirens started to be all about us. How many times? How many times did I have to call them for you or you for me, babe? It became like a thing," said Jane. To see how much one of us could do before the other one had to call the sirens. We got to know them, didn't we, babe? We got to know every single driver by name." "The sidewalks do that. They expand and contract, said Zero. "So outside on this one, a butcher is splitting open a hog's head to scoop out the stuff inside. He swings the cleaver like Enter the dragon. Brains bloom out on the concrete, and I think about Flacco's brains because how could I not? But the grinning hog's head is giving the butcher a lot of trouble today and doesn't want to come apart, so he drops it on its ear right there, oozing these little red trickles from the corners of its mouth. And then he moves back inside the stall into his special kind of darkness and his special kind of business. The hog's head is not Flacco. The hog's head is not a stand-in for you or me or anything. It is important to learn that right now, to face that. You have to get down on the sidewalk that is whirring like an escalator and stare the hog in the face and confront him for what he is, or you are lost. The flies are way ahead of us. Now here they come swarming over the hog's big, wide, dumb, dead face, crowding the eye holes and filling up the grinning mouth. They make a brilliant show out of it under the noonday sun. I see showers of blues and indigos from their wings as they billow up and settle down and billow up and settle like one hungry thing around the hog's head. I don't think they have names. I don't think they have names for these kinds of blues and electric violets radiating off those wings. Maybe these colors are the last thing you see before you... I keep having this dream, or the dream keeps having me. I get on a bus and the driver's face is wrapped in gauze. His big white head's as fat as a pumpkin, and I say, "Hey man, what the hell happened to you?" He motions me toward the back of the bus with a big floppy clown sleeve, but there's no arm in his coat. Just the sleeve going like a windsock. I move back along the dark aisle, and every seat is taken up by a big white pumpkin-headed person. Each head wrapped up tight with gauze, just like the driver's head. Now, the pumpkin people are all sitting still as crash test dummies, and I would say staring straight ahead, but they have no eye holes. You just have to fill in the blanks with your imagination. Ba-lump, ba-lump goes the bus, like we just ran over something alive in the road. You know that sickening sound when you do that? Bright wands of light slash across the pumpkin passengers like somebody's opening and closing Venetian blinds. From where the light issues, I could not, before the punishment of God, tell you, because there is no traffic, and we are the only things moving down the awesome black highway into the crashing surf of the nighttime. Well, I get to the back of the bus, where that extra long soft seat is, like a sad old Davenport I can kind of stretch out on. And there's a girl there already laid out on the love seat thing like she's at a wake. Like she's at her own wake, you know? Her head is like all the other pumpkin people, all wrapped up and kind of glistening there in the streetlight moonlight. "What took you so long?" she says to me, clear as a nightingale, as if her mouth is right up next to my ear. This makes me reach up to brush the girl voice away, and I feel my own snowman head wrapped around tight with gauze, just like all the other passengers. Well, I'm home, I say through the bandages. My voice sounds like a wolf crying in a canyon. I'm home. I'm home. And that's the dream, brother. This has been the DEARHEART Notebooks, written and narrated by Julian Summerhill, based on the journals of Julian Summerhill. Certain names and locations have been changed to protect anonymity. Recorded by Robert Kirby at the Noise Shop in Berkeley, California. All you have to do is lie there. Productions, 2019. All rights reserved.